All right, looks like some people are starting to show up. I'm just gonna wait for a couple minutes till 1 o'clock to see if anyone else shows up. And I'm getting an annoying echo. Let me see. Okay, so when I'm going to start this, I'm not going to be able to see. Sorry, let me turn my volume down here. When I start this, I'm not going to be able to see any of your questions or anything coming in. So if you want, you can send me a message to my Facebook page, and I'll keep that open. So if a question comes in, I'll be able to answer it. And if you hear some barking in the background, that's my dogs, Bonbon and Georgie. So just kind of to introduce this, what I'm going to be talking about is a few things that we can be doing within the Libertarian Party, really to just get the word out there more about the party, get a lot more people joining the party, get a lot more people voting for our candidates. There's basically a bunch of different strategies that I have. Some of them are just ideas that need to be developed. Hopefully, you guys will have some input on that. There's a lot of this is going to be related to kind of psychology and marketing, just because I've studied a lot of that, and basically something that we're kind of missing out on as a party is using some of these, taking advantage of some of these same tactics that the other parties are using, and of course they're using them in more uh, deceptive ways that I'm not going to recommend, but we should at least be aware of them, and we should at least use whatever information is available to our advantage, because otherwise they're using it, and they're, I mean, we're always talking about the brainwashed sheep. That's not just because these people are stupid; it's because they're actually being manipulated in the same way that advertising manipulates everybody. Um, So that's kind of the main focus of this. I'm going to have plenty of ideas to share, some actual real world examples of what does work, what doesn't work. If you don't know, I ran a campaign for myself in 2014. I ran for the Texas House of Representatives. I got about 23% of the vote, which was pretty good. I learned a lot through my campaign, what works, what doesn't work. I raised maybe $5,000, and that's all that I spent on the campaign. Um, I guess a little bit of that was my own money, but a lot of it came from donations. And so, I'm not talking about something that's going to cost a lot of money here. So if you're a candidate, um, you might learn a lot here that's going to help you with your campaign, how to basically frame your campaign, and how to get it to work. If you're just involved in the party, if you're on social media trying to promote the ideas of liberty, then a lot of this is going to help you too. So, um, It's about 1 o'clock, so let me go ahead and get this thing started. Um, so first, let me just introduce myself. I grew up in Los Angeles. I worked in tech. I did a lot of website sysadmin type stuff. I worked in video production, and a lot of this had to do with developing fundraising videos, which were, kind of the tearjerker videos where uh, to to put it bluntly, we were, toying with people's emotions to get them emotionally involved in an idea so that they would invest money in it. Of course, it wasn't that sinister, but it is the same concept that any of these other campaigns are using, and it is an important part of the strategy. I studied in school marketing and advertising, so I know quite a bit about that. And when I lived in LA, I participated in a lot of market research. So I kind of got to see that from the subject side of that. Some of those products you'll recognize: Family Guy, Taco Bell, Budweiser. Um, and there's really a lot to learn from these guys, and we really need to implement some of these strategies when we're developing our campaigns, whether it's social media campaigns for the party as a whole, or whether it's social media campaigns, or any kind of media campaigns for candidates. um, Finally, I developed a brainwashing app. That's what I call it anyway. uh, it wasn't really a brainwashing app, or maybe you could call it that, but basically what it was an app that would uh, uh, use the science of positive psychology and all kinds of other associative psychologies to change the way that you think. And it would be, it wasn't this, again, wasn't something sinister. This was something where you get to pick what you want to think. If you want to be happier, if you want to be, um, more energetic, you would basically select this, and then through images and sound, it would stimulate your brain using actual technologies that studies were proving were working to basically change the way that your brain worked, the way that your thought process was. So, with that, I want to say mind control is real. And this isn't like some government conspiracy where, there's satellites in space beaming radiation down into our brains and we all need tinfoil hats. That's not really what it's about. Mind control is, if you think about it in terms of advertising and marketing, the purpose of an advertising and marketing company is to control what people do, to control what they buy, to control what they wear, to control their actions. Online, you'll have campaigns where they want you to click something, they want you to share something, and the mind control is basically, what are they giving you? What are, with when training a dog, either sometimes they'll use treats or a clicker. Basically, you're controlling the dog's behavior, and advertisers are doing to this constantly. And you might look at billboards and say, those don't affect me because I know they're advertising, I'm not going to pay attention to them, but they're still working on you. Big corporations spend billions and billions of dollars making this work, and also the big parties, the Democratic parties and the Republican parties, spend billions of dollars not just advertising, but doing research into what advertising works, what statements work. And I'll get a lot more into the detail on that a little bit later. Um, you've probably all seen this before if you're a libertarian. Basically, we've got more than 40% of Americans who do not identify as Republicans or Democrats. But if you look closely at this, those percentages add up to 99%, not 100%. And you'll notice that the 40% are independents, they're not libertarians. So even though people don't like Democrats or Republicans, they're not picking libertarians. And there's a pretty good reason for that. And it's nothing random. It's actually pretty explainable. So let me ask this question: who are you voting for the next president of Malaysia? I'm not sure exactly what their process is over there, whether they have a president or prime minister, however that all works. Probably for the same reason you might not know. But basically, you don't care because there's nothing in it for you. We do know some of the presidents of Iran, Iraq, some of these other places that we're always in conflict with, and we always hear about them on the news. But somewhere like Malaysia, no one's really interested. And if they're having an election right now, they may or may not be. Nobody really cares about it here because it doesn't affect them. So thinking about that, most voters don't pay attention to the libertarian primaries because there's nothing in it for them. So that might be kind of a no-brainer, but at the same time, if we are able to get our candidate to the main on the main debate stage with whoever wins the Democrat and whoever wins the Republican primary, we still have the problem that people have been listening to them banter on and on for months. They've got a huge head start on us, and that creates an actual emotional, psychological attachment to those candidates, whether it's good or bad. Even if we're on the stage, they already have that attachment to these other candidates, which I'll talk about a little bit later, being first. That hurts us. That hurts us a lot. That's actually a significant problem. So we really need to broadcast. We need to have our internal debates broadcasted. They need to be higher production quality. They need to look professional, the same way that that the other primaries are looking, and we need to do that on a massive scale. And this really doesn't take a whole lot to do. Um, but it's really, really important, because we need to get people getting that emotional attachment to our candidates before the general debates even come along, assuming we can get onto that stage, which hopefully we'll be able to do this year. Another thing that we need to do to help that is, we see a lot of people on the news interviewing candidates, interviewing Republicans. You have Fox News and CNN who claim they're kind of central. They're not gonna be biased to one side, but they're always interviewing Republicans or Democrats, so that it's not CNN's opinion that they're giving, or it's not Fox News's opinion that they're giving. It's the expert that they're talking to, and that expert is an expert, so they must know what they're talking about. And so that's kind of where the slant comes from. We have kind of some libertarian shows, the Young Turks. I know they're kind of they lean Democrat sometimes. Ron Paul's got his own video production that he broadcasts these videos weekly or monthly. But the problem is, they're just sitting there talking to camera, basically saying, "I'm an authority, listen to what I say." And people don't receive the message that well. I mean, if we're already on board with it, yeah, we see it and we're like, yeah, we like what this guy's saying. But it's not the same as if Ron Paul were to bring on an expert in any kind of economic field, like let's say some big guy on Wall Street, brought in, where he'll say, yeah, look, everything's, this is the way things are going. And they can hear it not just from us because we're libertarians, but they'll hear it from experts that are agreeing with libertarians. We need a lot more of that, because that kind of validates our message to people who don't know who we are. What doesn't work? Picture this conversation between an anarchist and a statist. The anarchist says, "Do I have the right to take your things?" The statist says, "No." The anarchist says, "What if I come back with a majority?" The statist still says, "No." The anarchist says, "So where does the government get the right to take someone else's thing?" The statist says, "Because the majority agreed to it." Well, this is the same logic that they just disagreed with, that they just struck down, as saying, you can't take my things, but the government can. And it's kind of this delusion that people have, where they're not able to accept where this actual right comes from. So with that, I just want to say, you can't reason with the unreasonable. These people they're being unreasonable, and it's not that they're stupid. It's not that they're ignorant. It's that they've had this thought process put into their head so many times over so many years, that it's really difficult to overpower it, and you can't do it with reasoning. Most people, they don't make their decisions using reason and logic. I'll get into that in a little bit too. We're asking people to manage government who can't manage their own lives. So the average American is $20,000 in debt. It's probably more than that now. They spend beyond their means with no regard for the debt that they create. So now, if they do this to themselves, then how are we going to convince them not to take free government programs because it's going to put someone else in debt? That's like telling them, here, spend someone else's credit card. If they're already being responsible with their own credit card, how is the argument that you're spending someone else's credit card going to somehow make them come to their senses? It's not. So that's kind of a losing argument. I see these things like this all over Facebook all the time. What these are actually doing, we think they're helping promote our idea that you shouldn't vote for Trump or you shouldn't vote for Bernie Sanders. But what these are actually doing is these are actually helping those candidates. So for one thing, in most people's minds, it's not Trump versus Bernie versus Hillary versus the Libertarians. It's Trump versus Bernie versus Hillary. And that's pretty much what's in people's heads right now. Even some of the smaller Republican candidates are not being talked about as much. And why is that? And it's because these guys have such outlandish solutions that they're being badmouthed the most on the internet. So when you post a picture of the Great Wall of Trump, well, what happens to a Trump supporter who sees that? They say, "Oh yeah, that wall that he's going to build is going to be great," and they'll actually agree with it. So it doesn't help anything. Bernie's free stuff. All this does is, to somebody who's let's say there's somebody who doesn't have any interest in politics at all, and they never heard of Bernie Sanders, and then they see this. Do you think they're looking at the $18 trillion figure that they can't even, a number so big they can't even comprehend? Or are they looking at, oh, wait, he's going to give us free Medicare, free retirement, free college? That's what they're looking at. And I mean, we see this all the time. People fall for the, sign up for 10 free DVDs, and then you're entered into this thing and you got to pay $40 a month. People fall for that free word all the time, and they don't even pay attention to the dollar amount consequence that follows it. When it comes to Bernie printing money over here, what's bad about that? I mean, to someone who doesn't understand politics or economics, well, he's going to be printing money. Well, that means that finally all this money that the government has in these people's head, the government just has an unlimited supply of money. That's finally going to start coming our way. So posting these pictures and sharing them around and bad mouthing other candidates doesn't help at all. For those reasons, and also for the fact that when people see this and they start seeing a positive in there and they associate with it, what you're actually doing is you're strengthening the bond from that person to that vote. Rest assured, the argument you use today to restrict the rights of others will be used tomorrow to restrict the rights of yours as well. Well, if I'm planning on voting for someone who's going to restrict the rights of somebody else, that's fine with me. As one of these voters who's not libertarian, that's fine with me, because right now there's nobody out there saying that they want to take anything away from me. So I don't have anything at risk. If somebody was saying we should confiscate all the guns, and there was a voter who was anti-gun, they're going to be all for that because they don't have any guns. But let's say they have a car, and let's say at the same time somebody's saying we should confiscate all the guns, another person saying let's confiscate all the cars. Well, the person voting has a car, so this might actually make sense to them. But at the same time, they're going to think, no, that's not realistic. That'll never happen. They'll never take that away from me. So they just kind of, discount it as an actual argument, and they don't listen to it. So when you have things like socialism, and we're always saying what the negative consequences of socialism and communism and totalitarian dictatorships is. When people hear that, they say, yeah, but that'll never happen here, right? They're always saying that. And that kind of goes with this theory that if you hear something, you'll forget it. If you see it, you'll remember it. But if you do it, you'll understand it. And that's why people are not understanding how bad socialism can be, because they haven't actually experienced it yet. They see it or they hear about it and they forget it. Like we can tell them about it all we want, but they're going to forget about it. If they see it, like there's pictures of Venezuela going around and the disasters it's causing, they'll see it and they might remember it, but they still don't understand it. So again, with the rational arguments, we're not really getting through to them. This I just thought was pretty funny. A lot of people have tried socialism, Venezuela, North Korea, China, Cuba, the Soviet Union. Did it work for those people? No, it never does. I mean, these people somehow delude themselves into thinking it might, but maybe it'll work for us. And that's really how some of these people are thinking. And again, I want to reiterate, this isn't because they're dumb voters. Really, I mean, if you look at most people, we say things like it's not polite to talk about politics in public. I hear this all the time when I'm hanging out at the bar and I start talking about politics. People are like, you're not supposed to talk about politics at a bar. And the fact that we don't talk about it, and instead all we talk about is football and sports and whatever else the topics are, That's what most people are talking about. They don't understand politics or economics or any of this stuff. And a lot of it, like what they were taught in high school, is so irrelevant. I mean, all the stuff that I had to learn as a libertarian or to become a libertarian, I learned after I was out of school. I learned on my own independent research, and I realized that like what they were teaching me in school is complete nonsense. So we can't rely on people to be formally educated about how this stuff works or even care about it, and we have to find a better way to get to them. There was a study that was done by a neuroscientist that basically he tested a bunch of people's abilities to make decisions, and these people had brain damage in the part of their brain that controlled their emotions. And what he found is that people who could not make emotional decisions could not make rational decisions, because no matter how rational you think your decision is, it's actually emotional. It has there's as much as you think the candidate you're picking is because 2 + 2 = 4, it's actually an emotional attachment to it. The emotional attachment might be because he got up and he talked about economics, and he made sense out of it and you agreed with it, but you don't keep all of that in your head at every single moment. So when that candidate's name is mentioned, that doesn't all pop back into your head. What pops back into your head is, yeah, I like that guy. And when you go to vote and when you're in the voting booth, that's the emotion that pops back into your head, and that's where you actually make that decision. So look at this comparison shopping. If I were to ask you which of these cars you would want to pick as your daily driver, which one would you pick? And most people would pick the car on the left because it's shiny, it's new, it looks fancy, and I'm talking assuming you don't have to pay for either one of these, right? So you're not worried about the cost of it. Which one would you pick? And the problem is that most people don't know anything about cars. So a split decision, they might say, well, I'm going to pick the one on the left, but did they care to open the hood? Because if they open the hood, maybe they'd find out that the one on the left doesn't have an engine in it. So then you would probably want to pick the one on the right, right? So, but people don't do this with their candidates. For the most part, they don't think about politics. They don't think about, what's at stake. They don't understand economics. So they're not going to make their decisions like this. Here's another example. If you were hiring a lawyer and you had to pick between these two guys, which one would you pick? I have no idea who these people are. Just pick some random pictures off the internet. But you're going to pick the one who's in the suit and who looks like a professional and who looks like he's ready to handle some business, right? So a lot of this emotional attachment comes from everything from physical appearance to stage presence when you're in a debate, to body language and everything else. And these are topics that, I mean, people have gone into deep study on that fill volumes and volumes of books. What we have here is this is the Republican debate versus the Libertarian debate that was broadcasted a week or two ago. And what's really disturbing about this is think about the car or the lawyer. Which one looks like the pretty package that people are going to pick? People who don't, they're not listening to a single word that these people are saying. They just want to pick one. They're going to go with the Republicans. Why? Because it looks pretty. Now think about this too. Well, for one thing, they're kids yelling at each other. I mean, if you look at those debates, there's not a whole lot of substance in those debates at all. In the Libertarian debate, it was all like, I mean, everything that I heard out of every candidate just about was brilliant. They weren't sitting there bad mouthing each other. They were actually coming up with ideas of this is what we need to do. Some other things to point out is look at the colors in the back of the Republicans. There's red and blue, right? It's not just all red, and this is their debate. I'm going to get into a little bit about staging later and how we need to be on the same stage as these guys. But what they're doing by selecting those colors is they are putting themselves on the same stage as the Democrats. So they're reinforcing this idea that it's Democrats versus Republicans. Also, look at, if you see in the back, you can see there's Fox News logos, Facebook, probably some other ones. Down on the Libertarian one, all you see is Libertarian Party. We're not associated with anybody. We don't have anybody saying these guys are legitimate. And why is Facebook up there? I mean, Facebook doesn't need to advertise Facebook. Everybody knows about Facebook. They're not there to advertise. They're there to reinforce the message of this party. They're there to give those people more legitimacy. Let me just go into this for a second. If you have, let's say you're playing Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and you have a tough math question, right? And you can phone a friend or you can ask someone from the audience. These are the two people in the audience. Which one are you going to ask your math problem to? Now, I know everyone in the Libertarian Party is going to say, well, I'm not prejudiced, I'm not racist, or maybe it's not racist to pick the guy on the left. But the fact is that if you put this study in front of people, more people are going to pick the guy on the left because of the stereotypes that associate him with being able to do math better, right? These are they're put there in our brains since we're born, either through advertising, through TV, through a million different things, through our friends, things that we hear, everything. Look at these two right here. This is purely based on image. These two options for a pain reliever right here, Advil versus HEB's ibuprofen. Well, what's in Advil? And do you see the word ibuprofen on Advil? It's there, but it's so small you can barely see it. All you see is Advil, right? And it looks like they spent money on that packaging, right? The HEB version looks like they just took some colors and slapped it on a box and said, okay, here, that's good enough, right? And why is the Advil so much more expensive? Well, because they do advertising and people get an emotional attachment to that brand when they see and hear their ads, right? So when you go in here, you see, oh, Advil, I hear that one's good, and you take it, right? And you don't pay any attention that the one right next to it, which if you look at the active ingredients on the back of Advil, this is 100 capsules of 200 milligram tabs, and so is the HEB version. They are absolutely identical. And if you look at some of these other things that they sell, mouthwash, toothpaste, mayonnaise, they'll have different names at different prices. And if you look at the back, not only are all of the ingredients exactly the same, but you'll see that the place of manufacture is even the same, and the bottles are the same. And when the bottles are the same, but not a normal shape, usually what that means is that someone has a copyright on those bottles. So there's only one person using those bottles, or there's only one manufacturing plant using those bottles. And if two bottles match, there's a very good chance they're coming out of the exact same factory. What they're doing is they're selling their overflow to an off brand for cheaper, so that they can still make money off of the overproduction. But at the same time, they're keeping the high value of their brand up. So if you know supply and demand, if you overproduce, you need to lower your prices so you can get rid of it faster. Well, the problem is in marketing is once you lower your price, it's hard to push it back up. So in this way, what they can do is they can lower the price by selling it under a different, cheaper looking brand, meanwhile keeping their own Advil price up. Now, I don't know for sure if these two in particular are manufactured by the same factory, but that same idea happens across multiple products. So this guy right here, right? He's not the prettiest guy to look at, but what is his message? Free college. And so when people walk away, they have a message in their head of what? Free college. So, but still, look at him. He's still sharply dressed in most of his appearances. He dresses pretty much like this. His stage presence isn't that strong as far as his body language, but in the way that he talks, he is very powerful. And he gets the crowd going, which creates an emotional attachment, which gets people to continue to want to vote for him. Now, once this happens, you can't reason with these people. You can't have an absolutely rational discussion with them, telling them not to get free college because it's ultimately bad. Same thing with Trump. What do people walk away with? The fact that there's a wall. Everyone wants a wall, right? Or he wants to bomb some country. And so they walk away with a very, very simple idea in their head. And these simple ideas are easy for them to say, yeah, I like Trump because he's going to do this. He's going to make America great again. These very simple things, right? And what do the libertarians have? Well, if you saw our debates, there was a lot of this. To somebody who doesn't understand any of it, they're just going to hear a lot of mumbo jumbo. They're not going to get it. They're not going to want to vote for it. They're not going to understand it. It's really like we're talking to the echo chamber. We're not convincing any outsiders that this is why they need to vote for us. Now, of course, I'm not recommending that we need to give out free college and other stuff, but we need to figure out a way that when you put us next to these guys, that we have something that people want even more than what they have. Because I mean, that's exactly how it works. When you walk into a restaurant, assuming every item on the menu is the same price, which one are you going to pick? The one that looks the most delicious to you, the one that's going to satisfy you the most. And for a lot of people, that's going to be free college. For a lot of other people, it's going to be border fences. And for everybody else who understands economics, they want freedom, but that's not really conveyed in our message. Another way to look at it is like this. You compare free college to freedom. No matter how many times you tell people, if you take that money off, that thing's going to come over and slam their hand, they're still going to go for it. But what does freedom look like? And especially when we get into this discussion of liberty versus tyranny, this is America. We're already free, right? So a lot of people have this idea in their head that we don't need more liberty, we don't need more freedom because I can already do everything that I want to do. Well, these people aren't trying to start businesses. These people aren't trying to sell raw milk. These people aren't trying to smoke pot. These, they're not trying to travel in and out of the country. They're not trying to do things that the government is in the way of. So to a lot of these people, they already have all the liberty they can possibly want. And when you talk about tyranny, well, there is no tyranny. Like I don't see any tyrants running around. It's a delusion that they have in their head. So this dichotomy here doesn't work. And what we have does not look as something that they want to reach out and grab from off the screen, like I'm sure you want to do with that stack of $100 bills right now. And this comes down to having a lot of these discussions. Don't engage with people who are being irrational, and you're never going to convince them that these other people are good. The best strategy that I've found, and all these psychological studies will agree with it, is that you need to basically don't discuss with them about their candidates. Discuss with them about your candidates. Because again, when you're talking about their candidates, you're building neural pathways in their brain that link to this candidate. But the more you talk to them about your candidate, the libertarian candidates, the more you start building those bonds. And if they run into another person who mentions Gary Johnson or John McAfee, they're going to start hearing these names and they're going to become more commonplace. And then, it might be 10 or 20 conversations they have down the road. Instead of saying, I hate that guy, they're going to say, well, yeah, I've heard his name like a million times. I don't know what he's about. Maybe I should finally just go look him up. See what these crazy libertarians find in those guys. We're dealing with kids who want to buy guns but don't want to learn about gun safety, or Bernie Sanders voters who want to play God with the economy but they don't want to learn about economics. We're not going to teach everybody everything about liberty overnight. It's going to be a really strong battle, but we can't teach them if we're already alienating them by telling them how much their candidates suck. We're playing on their court. We have if this is us, we're playing this game alone. This right here, if you ask people to draw a map of what the political structure of the country looks like, they're going to say it's the Democrats versus the Republicans fighting for control of America, right? This is how we play the game. There's the Democrats fighting the Republicans over here, and then we're just kind of over off here doing our own little thing, right? So, and I know this is it sounds a little counterintuitive because I'm saying don't engage with their candidates, don't fight with their candidates. But that's really more, I guess that's got more to do with when we're talking about, for example, our social media, and we're promoting one candidate. It's fine to compare candidates, but it's not a good idea to just bash one candidate. And it's actually a really good thing to compare candidates, because what happens is you're actually putting them into the same court. So an example of this might be if the Lakers are going to play the Spurs, and you ask someone, who do you want to win? And one guy says the 49ers. Everyone's going to look at that guy like, hey, you're crazy. They're not in this game. They're not even in the same sport, right? So what we really need to do is we need to take our candidates and we need to put them on the same stage with the other guy's candidates. And this is how we're going to make this happen. So here's an experiment. This was a psychological study that was done where basically they had a bunch of participants in a room. Now, only one person was an actual participant. The other people were made to look like participants, right? So you had, let's say, 5 people sitting at a table, and they would show this to those 5 people. The first person would say, the longest line is the one on the right. The second person would agree, third, fourth, fifth, and to the final person. The fifth person was the actual study participant, right? And he would, of course, agree because the last line is in fact the longest. Well, here's what happened. They went through this a few times, and then a few times later, they kept reordering the lines. So they'd be in the longest line would be in a different position, but it was always still obvious which one was the longest. So now what would happen was people would start picking the medium line and saying it's the longest one. The first person would say the medium, the one in the middle is the longest. The second person would say the one in the middle is the longest. And it all continued that way. And finally, when you got to the guy at the end who was not in on the study, what happened was he would also pick the medium line and say that's the longest line. And he would look uncomfortable doing it. And it's because he knew that was the wrong answer. But there's this herd mentality that, well, I must be crazy because all these other people are saying that that's the longest line. Now, this is what we're up against because we have everybody in the country saying it's Democrats versus Republicans. And we're out here trying to say, yeah, but you should vote for us. Well, we sound like the crazy guy who says the 49ers should win, right? So there's this herd mentality. But there's a couple ways we can get around that. And one of these videos I saw, I think this was yesterday, actually, Stossel was interviewing Ann Coulter. I guess that's how you say her name. And she's usually on Fox News or I think she's Fox News. And she was in this room with, it looked like at least a few hundred students, and they were asking her questions. And what happened was she was out there saying, you shouldn't be able to smoke marijuana. And people were saying, well, why not? We have freedom. And basically they were booing her and they were cheering on, everybody else who was supporting these libertarian ideas. Now, watching this video, think about that herd mentality, right? Let's say somebody was new to libertarians and they were sitting in this crowd. They hear all these people cheering and getting excited over libertarian ideas over Republican ideas, and they're going to start to see, wow, there's a lot of people who support this, and it's actually smart. They, whether they're thinking about it or not, they understand their herd mentality is kicking in, and they want to side with the herd, right? It creates the illusion that we are the majority, and in doing that, that's the herd that people want to be in. It empowers libertarians by letting them know, hey, you're not the only one who's crazy. There's a lot of people who believe in this, and it makes newcomers feel really welcome and want to learn more about this. So what we really need to do, I talked about before about, we need to bring in experts. We need to bring in Democrats and Republicans into an arena where we outnumber them so that we can get that herd mentality going. But we can also have an actual discussion between them. Now, this is like, it's kind of like a trick of making us look like we win even when we didn't win. But the fact is, I'll be cocky about it. We're going to win anyway because liberty is better. But something else to think about here is laugh tracks. If you've ever seen a laugh track on a TV show, there's a reason they put them there. And there's a process in your brain called, or there's a type of neurons they call mirror neurons, which basically is if you stop and smile at somebody, they're going to smile back at you. And it's kind of a reflex reaction. And what happens is they do that, like not because they want to, but it's kind of a natural reaction. And by adding a laugh track on a TV show, what you're doing is if somebody's watching a TV show alone, they're actually they're going to start laughing because they hear other people laughing. It's that same herd mentality. And this is exactly, this is not some conspiracy theory. This is kind of public information that's why they put laugh tracks on these shows. And, this is literally mind control. And there's other studies that have shown that if you force yourself to smile, if you're not happy and you force yourself to smile, you'll actually start to feel happier. So if you can force somebody to laugh by hearing other laughter, they're going to start laughing, whether they think it's funny or not. They're going to start to think it's funny. And all these tricks are always at play. There's another study that was done where people were offered free beer. And they said, okay, we've got 2 beers here. And you can try the first one, try the second one, tell me which one you think was better. Most people picked the second one. Now they did the same study, and then they told them afterwards, by the way, we added a few drops of vinegar in the second one. That's why it tastes different. So now they did the same study again, except they told people beforehand, there's 1 beer here, And then there's this beer, but we put a few drops of vinegar in it. Taste both and tell us which you think is better. And they always said the first one. They didn't like the thought of vinegar being in the beer, right? Because it sounds kind of strange. Now, what this shows is that people liked the flavor of the vinegar, but they had kind of a predisposition to not like it based on what it sounded like. But once they tasted it and they already had it, they were like accepting of it, right? Well, think about these for one thing, in terms of fluoride in the water. Well, you've already been drinking it for years. It hasn't killed you yet. It doesn't really taste that bad, so there must not be anything wrong with it. And that's why we have people just saying, okay, fluoride's not that big of a deal. NSA wiretapping is the same thing. I've been using this phone the whole time. I just found out the NSA is inside of it. Well, it hasn't really harmed me at all, so I guess it's not that big of a deal, right? So you have people accepting these because of that. Well, let's look at Bernie Sanders, right? Did he come out and say, I'm a socialist and I'm running for president? Not exactly. He pretty much started getting a good sized crowd, and then he came out and said that he was a socialist. So this is really that same kind of theory. If we're doing this as libertarians, what I've seen, especially because people confuse the word libertarian with liberal, is it doesn't work to just come out and say, I'm a libertarian. What we need to do is we need to be good politicians. We need to spread these good ideas that we have. And then once people, and this is how I did it with my campaign. Once people said, oh, well, what party are you with? Then I would tell them I'm a libertarian, and they would say, oh, wow, that's interesting. And then they'd be more interested in the libertarian platform and start asking me all kinds of questions about it like that. So that's more of an approach that we need to take. But if you just go out there and say, I'm a libertarian, I'm not a Democrat, I'm not a Republican, I'm just a libertarian, and you should vote for me, then they really get disinterested and think like, I've never heard of libertarians, I'm not going to vote for this guy, right? Effective frequency in advertising is when they talk about different words that are used, or how many times you have to hear something or see something in order to affect your decision. So this is a commercial for an antidepressant. And basically, if you watch this video, it's on YouTube. It's a 90-second commercial. And in it, you will hear the word Abilify said 8 times, the word antidepressant 4 times, and the word depression 8 times. And what this is, plus you've got the logos down at the bottom of the screen, the .com, and at the end it shows the logo again, nice and big, and the words are all over the place. But they keep repeating it over and over and over again. Now, what we need to do is and something else here is, you'll notice like when they go into the disclaimers at the end, when they start saying, this drug might cause suicidal thoughts and all this other stuff, they do it in a different voice. You'll see this woman talking in her voice, and then when it gets to the disclaimers, there's a guy kind of in a low, by the way, this might cause blah, 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 blah. And sometimes they speed it up and they say it fast. And the reason that they do it in a different voice is because you're not associating those two voices together. And you'll actually hear the male voice say the words Abilify less frequently than you'll hear her saying it, because they don't want you to associate Abilify with those negative effects. So even though they're telling you, as required by law, they're tricking you into not associating them together inside of your brain. So some ways that we can take advantage of this as libertarians is to strengthen our message. We need to reduce the variety of things that we say. So when we're out there, spreading our platform, and it's fine for us to discuss all these things amongst other libertarians, but when we're out there trying to promote the word of libertarianism, we need to take a select few things and we need to take those and promote them. We need to increase the frequency that we do that. Well, if we get to say 1,000 sentences while we're out there, if 1,000 sentences cover 10 topics, we're only getting 10 sentences per topic. If 1,000 sentences cover 3 topics, we're getting 300 per topic. So by simply reducing the variety of things that we're talking about, we can focus on just a few, then we can do that. If you look at the $15 minimum wage, the living wage, first of all, what they've done here is they've actually done studies. There are groups doing studies where they'll pull people in from the internet. They'll do, Facebook ads. They'll get them to a survey, and they'll say, which one is more enticing to you, the $15 minimum wage or the living wage? And they'll figure out which one people are more receptive to. And they'll even do this in different states and different markets to say, okay, people in Washington are more receptive to a $15 minimum wage, but people in Florida are more receptive to living wage. They figure out exactly which words to use, and then they repeat this over and over and over again. So these words are basically selected through a scientific process, right? We're not using this for our ideas as libertarians. We're basically just going out there and using whichever words we feel are appropriate at that time, right? But here's the other thing to think about with this. When you see or hear about the $15 minimum wage, is it just one candidate that's talking about this? No, you hear dozens, maybe hundreds of Democrat candidates all over the country talking about this exact number, $15. That's not coincidence. That's basically a planned effort across the whole party. You see this with illegal immigration with Republicans. Immigration reform with Democrats. And then, of course, what's ours? Ours is open borders, which sounds a little bit more scary because, when we're talking about illegal immigration, we're just saying, okay, it's a bad thing and we need to find some way to stop it, right? When we talk about immigration reform, we're saying, okay, there's immigration. We need to change the way that it's done. Democrats get a picture in their head of we're going to let everybody in and grant everybody amnesty. But when libertarians say open borders, that basically says we're going to shut the whole system down and there's going to be chaos everywhere. And that's what Democrats and Republicans are picturing in their head. So this specifically would be a word that we shouldn't use, but we should find better words to use to describe what our border policy is. Same with marriage equality. That's something that's been studied. Those are perfect words to use because it doesn't, they're less offensive to Republicans than gay marriage, right? Defense funding is less offensive to Democrats than a war budget. They're scientifically choosing words which are more likely to get approved by the opposing forces. Here's a libertarian one that doesn't work so well: and the Fed, audit the Fed, and for a few reasons. First of all, most people, and I mean, this works great within the libertarian circle, but this doesn't work that well with people outside of it. First of all, a lot of people don't know what the Fed is, right? And when you explain it to them, well, that sounds like a pretty important part of government. Why do you want to take that away from me? You want to shut the government down and cause anarchy, right? What about audit the Fed? They think about an IRS audit. I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. Why do you want to wish it on the government, right? So we're making progress, but there's not a huge amount of public support because we're not scientifically picking those words that are working for these other bills that are getting a lot more public support. And I mean, even the $15 minimum wage is passing, city by city. There's a few cities who are adopting it now. Eventually it might make it nationally because people are accepting of it. It has more to do with the words itself than the policy. We could possibly call this an example is audit Wall Street. That might be a more strategic example that would get Democrats more interested in this. I don't know about Republicans. Maybe there's something that would work better with Republicans, and maybe there's something that would work great with both of them. But the idea is audit Wall Street is something that's, that might work a little bit better, and research needs to be done. I'm not saying that's a great one or not. This is another example of criticizing people. I posted this showed Bernie's tax plan, which basically said it's going to raise taxes on the poor. And what this did was this brought attention to Bernie Sanders. I lost followers because of this post. And I didn't say anything bad about Bernie Sanders. In fact, I actually said that I'd prefer Bernie Sanders over Hillary Clinton. But the fact that I'm talking bad about somebody that they want to vote about is making people not like me. So this is something that, and I see everybody doing this, all the libertarians doing this. Of course, Democrats and Republicans are doing it too, but they already have so many followers that it's less of a problem for them. So this is something we really need to stop doing. Again, we're playing in their court. Same one for Trump, comparing him to Hitler. This pisses people off. A lot of people that are like, I've talked to people that are like, yeah, libertarians are great because they're kind of like us Republicans. And then I post something like this, and they're like, oh, you hate Trump? Well, then I hate you. Unfollow, right? They're going to stop following me. And also something else to notice here is after I share this, I notice, hey, it's got Occupy Democrats on the bottom, which to me doesn't really make sense because Occupy Wall Street, the whole Occupy was against what you were occupying. So shouldn't Occupy Democrats really be technically Occupy Republic? I don't know. But it's anyway. So the point is, I'm spreading that word Democrats all over my profile on accident because I'm sharing this crap. I'm also sharing Trump's face, so people are getting a psychological attachment to it. So if you're doing this, stop it completely. Don't talk bad about, unless you want to put them side by side with our candidates and compare them. Don't talk bad about them. Okay, what about the rich? Negativity doesn't work, right? So what about all these Democrats who say, you know, the rich are evil people and blah blah blah? Well, they don't want to get rid of the rich. That's not their goal, which is why it works for them. They're not trying to take away the rich people, right? What they're doing is they're trying to take away their money. So they don't see it as as basically a negativity thing. What they're doing is they're focusing their voters on, this is what we're going to take. This is the prize. Let's go get it, right? They don't see it as they're taking it away from anyone. They see it as they're adding to themselves. They're going to be giving this to their voters. We're going to give you all this money that we're going to take from these rich people, right? The money itself is being held captive and it needs to be released. It's difficult to convince criminals not to steal or junkies not to take drugs unless you give them something else to replace it with, right? They want something. Give them something to satisfy that craving. With cigarette smokers, you give them nicotine gum, right? With heroin addicts, you give them what's it called, Oxycontin, where it's meant to be a substitute so that they don't have those cravings. Same thing with dogs. I mean, when a dog's chasing a squirrel, if you offer him some treats, he'll forget about the squirrel pretty quick, right? If you tell him, no, don't chase the squirrel, they keep chasing the squirrel. Think about Netflix versus Blockbuster. Did Netflix win because they were out saying Blockbuster sucks, Blockbuster sucks? No. They won because they were out saying Netflix, it's so much, it's better. There's nothing you've ever tried before. Try Netflix. And that's how they won. And they shut down Blockbuster. Now, I know this was a completely innovative idea. It did something that Blockbuster, couldn't have done, but isn't that what the Libertarian Party is doing in terms of politics? We're replacing these old systems that are obsolete, that don't work. But instead of bad mouthing them, we need to say, look, this is what we can do. Let people make the comparison themselves and then choose. They're going to choose. I saw an interview with John McAfee this morning. He said, we are all libertarians, which is, I heard that and I was like, this is great. This is the perfect, he says, we're already all libertarians. We all want American freedom, right? He says, even though we don't practice it and we're voting for these parties who don't represent it, that's what we all want, freedom. Now, it might not be true of every single person. I'm sure a lot of people want to take freedom away from other people, but the fact that he said, I mean, this is like they say, be the change you want to see in the world. We're all libertarians. Let's get this message out there, because if people already feel that they're part of our group and that they're welcome here, they're going to be more likely to accept our message. This is a psychological trick of word association. When you see two words next to each other, you associate them together. If you ever play the word association game where I say tree and then you say the first word that comes to mind, this is that. If we start putting these types of messages out there, these actually work really well into reinforcing the idea that taxation is theft. And eventually people they won't. Right now, a lot of people associate with tax with funding the government that they love, which is basically supporting their their addictions. What we need to do is just put this out. It doesn't need any explanation. All they need to do is start seeing this, and whether they like it or not, they're going to start to accept it. It's like they say, if you tell a lie often enough, people will start to believe it. Well, this is the truth. If we tell the truth, if it works for a lie, why wouldn't it work for the truth? Let's tell the truth often enough in a simple way, very often, until people start to get it. And they might not understand why they get it, but they'll start to get it. And then once they start to get it, then they'll start looking for more information to explain why they get it. That's how it works. So we don't want to associate the word taxation with libertarianism, because libertarianism and taxation are opposites. We don't want to associate them together. We don't want to associate theft with libertarianism. We could associate theft with Democrats. We could associate taxation with Republicans, which technically is true. And it hurts their association rather than ours. But we don't want to associate taxation as theft with libertarianism, because then you're associating taxation and theft with libertarianism, which doesn't add up, doesn't make any sense at all. But those words start to associate in people's heads. So there's a negative feeling and a positive feeling, and you're basically transferring that negative feeling over to the word libertarian, right? Whenever you see something on Facebook that does support any of these ideas, you need to like, comment, and share. Something that I see a lot is people see one of these pictures on Facebook and they like it and scroll, or sometimes they don't even like it. The way the Facebook algorithm works is they share information based on how many people like, comment, and share. So keep liking, commenting, and sharing. That helps the word get out there even more. And we need to do this on all of our candidates' materials. Whether they're your state candidates, whether you're your national candidates. If there's someone else's state candidates, but people in that state, share it anyway. Because the truth is, whether or not your people are going to see it and get it, if it's an interesting quote, people are going to like it. And if you have friends in another state, they're going to see it. But more importantly, because you're sharing something from another state, that image is still getting a share, which means people in that state are going to see that image more frequently also. So just keep like, share, comment, everything. Tweet. Free trial. This is in sales. This is something that works really well. You give someone a free trial and then they don't want to cancel because they've accepted ownership of the thing that they're trying, right? We need to have something that's sort of like that with the Libertarian Party. Right now, where, I see a lot of people out there, hey, give us $25 for a membership. And they're like, well, hey, I don't even know who you guys are. Like, I've never even heard of you. It doesn't work that well. It's really difficult to do. But what if we said, look, come to a free meeting where we're going to explain libertarianism, and we plan a 1-hour meeting where it's introduction to libertarians. And this is something that we need national support on. I mean, we can't leave it to all of the county organizations to have to come up with a curriculum for this. We need the effort of a national group to put this all together, so that the counties can actually go over this, and it makes it real easy for them. Because I mean, look, everybody, especially at the county level, we have full-time jobs. We don't have the time to put into this and then go out and present it. We need to make things easy for the counties. We need to create programs like this that will get people, hey, come here for free. Give them free stuff for coming. And if you come, we'll give you a free, what's the Obama phone thing? And it doesn't have to be something expensive. But once people are there, and then we have them captive for a good hour, and we can talk to them about libertarianism, and then we give them some kind of door prize. This is really going to help grow the party. So we need to figure out as a party, and this is one of those things that I told you about, where I have ideas, but I need your guys' ideas too. I need, I'm going to be at the Texas convention. I'm going to be at the national convention. If you run into me there, let's talk about this kind of stuff. Let's figure out who these people are that we can put together to come up with this type of program and really get it out there. Imprinting. This is another psychological thing where when a gosling is born, the first thing it thinks is its mom. So if you happen to be there and its mom happens not to be there, it will think you're its mom, and it will follow you around as if it's your mom. This happens in everything. This happens in advertising. The incumbent always wins. 90% of the time, whatever the actual number is, it's more frequent for that to happen. It's because people are already familiar with that, and they've already created that emotional attachment to it. Why change things when you change things, things could go wrong, right? What happened with iPod versus Zune? The iPod came out first, and Zune, they came out and they tried to copy it, and it didn't work because everybody already had iPods. There really is a psychology to this. And so we need to, a lot of times what we do is we take some of these other plans that, like the Democrats have been saying legalize marijuana for a long time. And then we come along and we're like, yeah, legalize marijuana. Well, they think we're copycatting the Democrats, even though we might have been saying it for years before, because they haven't heard it from anyone else first. They heard it from the Democrats, and they think we're trying to copy them. So we need to take some of these ideas that are our original ideas in that simplified format that I talked about, and we need to really get out there and push them so that people see those ideas first before the other guys start to copy them. And it's great when the other guys do copy them, because if they, if we pass a law saying, banning some type of illegal police activity, and everybody heard about it from us, but then the Democrats vote for and pass that bill, that's great, because they're still going to know that that was our bill, because most of those people saw us promoting that first. And we need to associate the, if it's two words, those two words need to be associated with libertarians. So when they pass that bill, all they're going to hear is, oh yeah, anti-police, libertarian something, which, by the way, anti-police is a bad idea, because that goes back into the negative thing. So, but whatever words we choose, they need to be associated with libertarianism. This goes back to the idea of adding and subtracting things. When you take away the Federal Reserve, what do you replace it with? It creates a void, right? So this is a problem in people's thought process. When you take something away, you have to replace it with something. This is actually another psychological problem here, that that you're creating a void that has to be filled, right? So how do you deal with cancer? Well, most people will say you treat it with chemo or cannabis. Not very many people will say you do it by removing a tumor, right? So, and of course, I mean, a doctor will tell you, let's try to remove the tumor if there is one, but that's not the first thought that comes to people's head. The first thought is always, you got to add something in there, and adding something is going to make it better, right? And think about what the Democrats do, right? They're always talking about, here, you're going to get this for free. What are the Republicans doing? We're going to build you a wall. We're going to give you this. We're going to give you that. And what are the Libertarians doing, right? We're basically saying we're going to give you freedom, but that's something that it's not tangible. They can't actually picture that. So how do they feel that they're actually getting something? So what we need to do is we need to sell a cure and not point out what the disease is. So when it comes to the Federal Reserve, what do you replace it with? Okay, well, let's find something to replace it with. Like I said about the dog, right? Chasing the squirrel. Let's find something to replace the Federal Reserve with, something that doesn't violate the non-aggression principle. Maybe it's maybe by we're not replacing the Federal Reserve with another entity. Maybe we're replacing it with something else. Let's replace it with sound money. Let's replace it with let's put the Treasury back in its place, right? Let's let the federal government do what it was originally intended to do. There are different ways that we can figure out a way to do this, but it has to be framed that we're giving them something, that we're taking something out and replacing it with something better, because that's what people buy. The thing with legalized marijuana, right? Is it a repeal movement? Are we taking a law away that says you can't smoke it? No, we're not. We're actually saying, here, we're going to give you free pot, right? Or not free pot. We're going to free pot from being criminalized, right? So this is actually a perfect example of something that the libertarians are really good at, saying, here, we're going to give you something. Now, of course, we're not interested in giving free college, because we don't want the government to pay for that. But is there a way that we can frame that? So, for example, could we say, like, there's the Khan Academy, there's all these types of free education online. Could we take these things and say, we're going to give you free education by giving those guys tax write-offs for like every single thing they do? So for one thing, we're lowering taxes, which is a very libertarian thing. And for another thing, we're providing free education without actually having to pay for it, right? So we need to kind of lead the way and lead by example, and take some of these things and figure out how can we convince. We always say the free market will take its place and will make these things happen. Well, let's figure out a way for the free market to do that. Let's figure out a way for the free market to create free education, and let's start making that happen before, because otherwise people are just going to say, well, government has to do it because obviously the free market's not doing it. Let's help push that along. I'm cutting your allowance. This is basically what we're saying when we want to do away with taxes, right? Democrats and Republicans, they argue about how much taxes should be, but they at least say, okay, but there should be taxes, right? So think about that with a kid, right? You're telling him, I'm going to lower your allowance. He's going to be much more receptive of that, especially like, even if, let's say you did something wrong, I'm going to lower your allowance. He's going to be less pissed off about that than if you say, I'm taking it away completely. We're the only ones saying getting rid of it. It doesn't work. I mean, that's what we want, but we need to figure out a better way to frame that into the real world, because it doesn't make sense in the thought process that everybody else has. Keep more of your paycheck. Maybe that's a better way to put it. Maybe this is a way that Ron Paul had a policy where he was going to say tips will not be taxed. That might be a great way to do it. We should not talk about removing taxes completely. Most people think we want to just shut down the government overnight. That's a cognitive problem. That's not what we want to do. And I mean, look, everyone would be in shock if we did that. So I think everyone can agree this needs to be a gradual change of shutting down certain government functions, but we can't just walk in there and say we're going to shut down taxation completely overnight. So we need to stop the words that we're using. They always lead to people believing that we're anarchists who want to shut the government down overnight. That's not what we're doing. So we need to stop using those words. We need to do research into what those words are that are going to make it more understandable about what we actually want to do. So what makes people dislike government? If all we do is teach people to senselessly hate government, then we're no better than Trump. He teaches everyone to hate each other, right? Convincing a statist that he needs help is like convincing an alcoholic to go to meetings. There's really a huge problem here in trying to convince people that government is a big problem. Exposing crimes of the state sends statists into denials. These are isolated incidents. It doesn't happen to everybody. It's only, one or two corrupt cops, a few bad apples, all that kind of stuff that they say. The founder of Mothers Against Drunk Driving, her daughter was killed by a drunk driver, and she went on to create Mothers Against Drunk Driving to stop a problem that she had become a victim of. Rape counsel groups are hosted by rape victims. Drug counsel groups are hosted by ex-junkies. Libertarian groups are groups of people hosted by victims of government. And that's, I think most libertarians have in some form been, victimized by government. And a lot of other people don't see it that way. Like, even if they get a traffic ticket, they actually believe that it's because they did something wrong and not that they're being robbed, right? So who goes to these rape council meetings? Victims of rape. Who goes to the drug council meetings? Drug addicts, right? You don't get sober people going to these meetings. You don't get people who haven't been victimized of rape going to these meetings because there's no point for them to, right? So if that's kind of how we view our groups, as we've all been victims of government, why would anybody want to join our group? Because they're not a victim, right? So we need to figure out a different way to pose this. Most people, like I said, there's, people don't see government as a problem because they're not a victim. Like, what's the saying? First they came for such and such, but I didn't speak up because that wasn't me. I mean, that's really how it works. And this is the mental behavior that we have to compensate for when we're adjusting our message. We're not telling them that the government's going to come for them eventually to take, you just took away someone else's rights and they're going to come for yours. No, we need to use a little bit better reasoning in trying to show them that, we have something better to offer, right? Otherwise, they're going to wait until it's too late. Play to their fantasy. So if you look at any of these things, right? Denmark, the happiest country in the world, $20 minimum wage, all these great things about Denmark. Well, yeah, they have some not so great things too, because of this. And I don't want to get into what they are right now, but what they're doing here is they're saying, here's a fantasy that we want to sell you, and associate it with the word at the bottom there, Democrat, right? Disneyland, the happiest place on earth, right? They want you to know that Disneyland, whenever you think of Disneyland, you want to think of the happiest place on earth. Whenever you think about the Powerball, they want you to think about that number. And what does it say at the bottom? Imagine that. They want to put that thought. They want you to picture in your head, what would I do if I had $301 million, right? Look at the one on the left. Will you hit the $20,000 jackpot? They're encouraging you to come up with a fantasy in your head of, yeah, I can win that, right? And of course, like anybody knows, that your chances of winning are like nothing, right? But the fact is, people buy the tickets because of the fantasy that it creates. People go to Disneyland because of the fantasy it creates. People want this country to be like Denmark because of the fantasy that's being sold, no matter how misleading that is. And this is one of those things where you can go back and debate with them and point out why all these things are wrong. And the extremely high taxes that they pay, the fact that their economy is on its way downhill because they're giving away so much free stuff and nobody wants to work and they're not producing anything. You can point out all these things to them, but it doesn't help. At the end of the day, all they have in their mind is $20 minimum wage. The fantasy, you can't kill that fantasy. So this goes back to, don't say that their fantasy is bad, but give them a better fantasy. What can we give them? And to most people, to business owners, we could say, imagine a world where you didn't have to pay taxes on your business income, right? And they'll say, well, hey, that's great. And they might start to question that other stuff. But if you put that fantasy in their head of, yeah, I'd have so much more money, I'd be able to do so many more better things. So what can we do with other people to kind of put, we need to come up with a fantasy to put in their head. And of course, this is again where it gets into the realm of, okay, but we're putting a fantasy. It has to be a realistic fantasy that is, part of the libertarian quote unquote utopia. We don't want to be deceptive. Because of course, I mean, look at this. We're rational thinkers in the Libertarian Party, right? We don't want to be deceptive, and then especially because people are going to come back and say, "Well, okay, we're rational thinkers. Let's think about what you just said. That doesn't make any sense. We can't say that." And we don't want to be known as liars. These other guys can get away with it because most of their voters and supporters are not rational thinkers. So what we need to do is we need to find a way to hook those rational thinkers, and we need to find an ethical way to do it. By planting a fantasy in their head and then getting them to come on board. And then we can explain more about the details to them. This is an example of the anchoring that I was talking about, where I saw this bag of chips on the shelf. They were all about the same price as all these other chips. Now, if all this was, picture this without the words and without the baked potato wedges in the middle, right? When you saw this, you would see what? A yellow potato chip. And what would you think it tasted like? You have no idea, right? So they put a picture of what they want you to think it tastes like right next to it. And they put a fantasy in your head of, oh, this is going to taste like those delicious little potato skins that I get, in whatever restaurant. And then they put the words down there just in case, to reinforce that message. Now, when you get home and you eat them, they don't taste anything like it. Of course, they don't have the same texture. They don't have the sour cream on top. They don't have the bacon bits. So really, what they're doing is they're planting this image in your head of what it's going to taste like, and you say, "Hey, that sounds delicious. I'm going to get that." When in fact, it's kind of a diversionary tactic. And this is what the Republicans and Democrats are doing, because you think about we're going to give you a $15 minimum wage. Oh, that sounds great, and then you find out that the price of all your groceries went up and that you don't even get to keep all $15 because the government took half of it, right? So this is what they're doing. We need to find out a way that we can position ourselves next to something that creates that fantasy, again, without being deceptive about it. And of course, the tough part is when you're working against people who are being deceptive, it's hard to do the same thing and not be deceptive. This is an example of something that we really can do, where so Trump's next to the guy from the Duck Call show, and then this is the creator of Family Guy and some other cartoons. And you can see Bernie Sanders at the podium. You can see some signs in the background that say Bernie. You can see the big Trump thing, and of course he's standing right next to Trump. These are things that we can start doing. I see all these libertarian celebrities, at all these conventions where Woody Harrelson is one of them. We've got all these libertarian celebrities, and I'm sure there are more of them. And we need to figure out how to get them to come out to our conventions and support us. We need to get them out to rally for some of our candidates and give a small speech, because this is like, I mean, you see this with product placement all the time. Like when you see a football player selling either clothes or a food or a restaurant, they do that because they're getting their product next to a celebrity, and that really helps sell their product. So what we need to do is we need to start doing some of that. We need, and of course, we're not being as deceptive about it, where you might have like the hottest basketball player out there, and maybe he's like, yeah, you should get this sandwich from Subway. Maybe he never eats at Subway, but he's being paid to say that, right? Well, and who knows? Maybe these guys are being paid to stand next to these presidential candidates. Probably not. There's because it's a little bit harder to do, but maybe they're getting some money for it. But the point is they do support these candidates. And we need to find the people who support our party to support our candidates, because they're there, and we don't have to pay them to just deceptively come out and say, hey, we support these guys. And people will listen to celebrities because it's a stupid concept, and they shouldn't be the ones making decisions, because after all, most of them are just actors. But I mean, it's something that works, and it's something that we really need to figure out how to get into our party. Notice that on these, you don't see anywhere does it say Democrat or Republican. They're focusing on this candidate, because to the people who are basically, they're not that much into politics. Maybe they grew up in a Republican home, and I'm a Republican. And then they see Bernie Sanders on TV talking to this guy. Oh, I like that show. Oh, that's the guy that made that cartoon. And oh, who's Bernie Sanders? I'm going to go learn about Bernie Sanders. And then, oh, he's a Democrat. Well, but I liked everything that I heard about him on TV. So I guess maybe I should convert to a Democrat. And I mean, these are some of the processes that go through people's heads. So again, this is, where I say, don't put libertarian everywhere. Put the names of the candidates. Let's come out as awesome candidates. Let's get that attention, and then let people find out that we're libertarians later. Also, you have the same crowd mentality here. When these people are talking, the crowds cheer, and everybody says, "Hey, yeah, we're gonna accept this guy and whoever he's supporting." And then there's that association working between the two names. This is supposedly the world's first PR campaign where Torches of Freedom. Basically, what they were doing is saying women are being oppressed because they can't smoke cigarettes. So they did this. I think it started with a protest where all these women went out into Times Square and started smoking cigarettes. And of course, it was all paid for by a cigarette company. Because they wanted to basically say only men are buying cigarettes, let's double it, right? And so what happened with this was this turned into everything. Women were in movies smoking cigarettes, and it became acceptable because they were seeing it. Something that they had never seen before is now being seen. And so think about like some libertarian type things where this is a problem, right? Women can't breastfeed in public. Well, maybe if we saw it more in movies as like, a not sexualized breast in plain view on in a movie where someone was breastfeeding, maybe that would help it to become more acceptable. And this would have to be not just in a chick flick, because then of course you've got a female audience watching it. Not too many men are going to see it. So some way to get this into plain view is, some way to fight all these different things. And we can do this with everything, where it's, smoking marijuana. I mean, think about how many movies have pot smokers in it, have pot references, pot jokes, and think about how that has helped to basically make the whole movement to legalize it. It gets people thinking, okay, it's acceptable because it's already everywhere, right? It's part of that herd mentality. It's everybody else is doing it. Okay, I guess I have no problem with it. Product placement in movies, right? Product placement works so well. These companies spend billions of dollars doing it. And of course, the best way to do it is when the product becomes part of the plot. So for example, there was a movie where it had something to do with, like, it was a horror movie or something, and everyone was getting a phone call, and it would ring with that like old Nokia song from the 90s, right? That I'm sure you would know. I'm not going to try to sing it, but it's everybody would hear that ringtone, and then they would say, "Oh, well, that's that ringtone," and it's reinforcing in their head. But not only were they hearing it like as if you were in an elevator and heard someone else's phone ring, but they're hearing it as part of a plot. And they said that is the best product placement you can have, where your product actually becomes part of a plot line in a story, rather than just a bottle of Coca-Cola sitting on someone's desk. But even then, you still see, I see Apple computers, Audis, BMW, they all spend billions of dollars getting their cars into these movies for the purpose of product placement. They will pay the movies to put them in there. Now, obviously, we don't have the kind of budget for that, but we need to start figuring out how we can start doing this. Maybe we have, there's a big talk about I think it was a Star Wars, one of the Star Wars guys was wearing a libertarian type T-shirt. It wasn't in the movie, but it was, off stage, and everyone was talking about it. That's great. That's great for us. Something else I want to talk about. I think I'm going over the time a little bit, but I should be coming up on the end pretty soon. So thanks for bearing with me if you are still on, and if not, this should be recorded so that so you can finish it up later. I am going to mention a bunch of books at the end that contributed to a lot of this information that have some really good stuff in there if you want to go read about more of it. So anyway, let me just continue with this. Drawing a map. So in people's heads, right, where are the Democrats and where are the Republicans? Automatically, Democrats are on the left and Republicans are on the right, right? Everybody knows that. So where are the Libertarians? Where do they come into all this, right? Are they in the middle? Are they, well, sometimes they say we're left and sometimes they say we're right, right? So, okay, how does that make sense? Like, so we're sometimes left, sometimes right. Does that mean we don't know exactly what we're doing? We're, what we really need to do is get a picture in people's heads of, you know, where do we stand? Where's a visual map of where we are? Because right now, this is what people are seeing: Democrats versus Republican, left and right. Where, you know, they can't visualize the libertarians anywhere in this equation, right? So we need to be somewhere. We need to create a way where people can see us. Now there's a few things going on out here, which there's this map, which I'm sure most of you have seen. And this is actually great because this puts the libertarians on the same map as liberals and conservatives, right? But of course, it doesn't say Democrats and Republicans. And I think there was a pretty good reason for that. I don't know if this is the official reason, but if you were to look at the policies of Obama and Romney and you know and Trump and everybody else, they're actually not left. They're not in the left liberal quadrant, and they're not in the right conservative. They're actually down in the bottom under status, and they're all pretty much grouped together. So whether or not that's why, but so the fact is, when you look at this, it doesn't have Democrat or Republican on there, which means we're still not on the same map as Democrats and Republicans. Something else to think about is if somebody takes one of these tests and let's say they place, oops, I guess you can't see my mouse if I put it over there. Let's say they place somewhere like right across the middle line or just above the horizontal line right through the middle on the right conservative side, right? Or even towards the top of the right conservative side, right? What does that say to somebody? So let's say we get a bunch of people to take these tests online and we really start pushing this because we want people to realize they're libertarians. Well, if they're that means they're 100% right, or they're 100% libertarian on economic issues, and maybe they're let's say 40% right on personal issues. Well, that still says that they're conservative, right? Well, doesn't that mean that they could be a libertarian? So maybe if we drew the line across the middle and said, okay, look, let's make it more like a plus minus thing, right? You're either libertarian or you're statist, right? Less confusing, less options, more central to are you a libertarian or not? That person who was a conservative would actually fall into the libertarian half. And what I've seen with a lot of people taking these tests is a lot of them they do actually fit above this half line. So if we can, you know, like McAfee said, we're all libertarians. If we can get people to realize that, hey, you're in the same box as us, we can actually have a conversation and see about getting them higher up to the top. This is another psychological study that was done on a group of people where they said, okay, you can pick one of these candies, right? The one on the left is a Lindor chocolate, and it's, you know, premium, high quality chocolate from the mountains of wherever, filled with a creamy center and all this other stuff. The one on the right is just a regular plain old Hershey's Kiss, right? The one on the left is 15 cents. The one on the right is 1 cent, and you can only have one. So they basically lined a bunch of people up and they all bought the one that was 15 cents because why? It's only 15 cents and it's so much better, right? So then they did the same study where they lowered the price of each one by 1 penny. Well, that means that this one is still 14 cents on the left and this one is free on the right. And for some reason, even though most people picked the Lindor chocolate when it was still only 14 cents more than the other one, they picked the one on the left and when they had to pay for either one. But now that this one is actually free, everyone's picking the one on the right. And it's kind of it's the power of the word free. So look at this example right here. If I said, here's a car and it's free, right? And I told one for everybody in America, right? And everybody was like, oh, that's great. I'm gonna go line up and get mine, right? And then the libertarian comes in and says, no, wait, don't. You don't want it. It's a trap. It's don't fall for it. Well, that's what we look like to them. We're basically getting in the way of their free stuff. So this is another example of something that doesn't work. The word free is powerful, but we need to give them something that we need to offer something that's free without getting away from our principles, figuring out a way to pose something that's free for these people. We have with Democrats free healthcare, free education, free living expenses. Republicans, free safety, free walls, free jobs. I mean, these are things. They're ideas. They're not exactly free, tangible things that they're giving, but they're things that they're giving to people conceivably for free. And libertarians are like, we're giving you people safety because we're not doing anything. We're trying to take government out of things, right? So how do we figure out a way to phrase this? And everything in sales, I mean, look at these examples: buy one, get one free, or the one on the right, which is like, you get a free vacation. All you have to do is sit through a seminar for like 4 hours on why you should buy a timeshare. Free works. It's free is the most powerful word in the advertising world at all, in the English language, probably. So we just need to figure out how can we incorporate this. And I talked about how can we, stop subsidizing things and figure out a way to, like, tax credits that helps us achieve two things. One is less taxes, and one is giving people free stuff until we can, get the training wheels off and let things like free education run on their own through private donations and all this other stuff. We need to, some other strategies, befriend politicians from both parties. Right now, we kind of alienate ourselves from those parties. We need to join them, because we have bills that we can pass that we can present them to some of these other candidates. And, like, let's say we have in my campaign, I had some anti-police misconduct bills, right, to fix the problem of police and violence and all this other stuff. If we can get Democrats that are currently in office to take these issues from us, so and like I said before, we need to promote these as our issues, and then we need to get the Democrats involved so they can take them and pass them. Well, then, hey, we're starting to get libertarian laws passed in office. And what might also happen is some of these Democrats and Republican candidates might actually say, let me go talk to some of these libertarians, because this is actually a good idea, this bill that they gave me. And I'm sure we can come up with all kinds of bills that the Republicans would like to. I know they like the fair tax, which is more or less libertarian. We need to make friends with these people. And, like, we don't have a whole lot of real professional candidates in our party. And part of that is a good thing, because they're not the career politicians, and that's great. But at the same time, there are a lot of politicians who have a little bit of experience, and maybe with a little bit of help, they could become actually good libertarians. And they might say, well, hey, let me actually join these guys, because now that I've heard some of what they say. And like I said before, the incumbents always have a much higher chance of getting back into office. Well, would that also be true if they switched to the libertarian platform and now they're on the ballot with an L next to them? Would they still, as an incumbent, still get that vote with all the connections that they have and everything else? It's possible. Who knows? We need to try it. Sorry, I guess I was getting ahead there. Yeah, get them to drink the Kool-Aid, so to speak. Let's see if we can convince some of these other politicians. I mean, Rand Paul, I know a lot of libertarians don't like him because he's not a purist libertarian. That's fine, but there's also, okay, but he went with the Republican Party. So did Ron Paul, because they had a bigger audience already. So let's see. Maybe maybe we can push them over the line and convince them to be more libertarian. Because, I mean, look, realistically, that's what we're doing with the rest of the population. Most of them are not libertarians, and we're trying to convince them to be. If we can convince these voters to be libertarian, why can't we convince politicians to be libertarian? And yeah, we're not looking for the corrupt ones who are only in it for money and power to come in and deceive us. We're actually looking for legitimate people who have, that great voting record, who actually know what they're doing. They believe in liberty, and we need those types of people to join forces with us. So next steps. We need to get our candidates organized. They don't all have the tools. There's not really a top-down approach where we have the national party or even the state parties giving a whole lot of resources to local candidates. There's a guy in Washington, Michael Pickens. He actually wrote a book that I read. I read this book before I even decided to run. It's kind of what made me decide to run. It's called Libertarian Leadership. And you can actually get the PDF for free on his website. I wish I had typed it on here, but it's libertarianleadership.org. You can go get his book for free. And it's really a great book that gives you a lot of ideas about running a campaign. It's also motivational, but it's something that, like, why aren't we having motivational groups for all of our candidates that motivates them? Why don't we have like some sort of platform from the national level that goes out to all the candidates across the whole country that says, look, here's some, everything from templates for your yard signs and your door hangers to those words that have been researched, that these are the words you need to fit into your platform. These are the things you need to mention on your website. Here's how you can get your websites made, which, by the way, I'm making websites for candidates. That's what I do professionally, is build websites. So I'm one of the things I'm offering is extremely discounted websites to all of the candidates to help them get their web presence online. Because when people want to know about you, if they hear your name on the radio or they get a door hanger, they're going to look you up online and they want to see something impressive. And you've got 5 or 10 seconds to really nail them with a website and say, hey, I like that guy. And we need this. We need to have somebody in the party we need to have some organized way to get people like, hey, your headshot is horrible. Let's get a photographer out there. Let's get you the right tools so you can get a good headshot online, so you look like a professional, so you look like somebody that's electable, right? I mean, there's simple tools, but for most candidates, we don't even have a list of what they are, what we need to do. So these are things. Hopefully, we can. If you're going to either the Texas State or the National Convention, hopefully we can meet up about these and talk about these and figure out some way to coordinate. Also, message me on Facebook, and most of this stuff can be done virtually anyway. So let's figure out how we can get this done. Many of our candidates are not serious about running a strong campaign. I've already talked to a few of them. Look, I know most of our candidates have full-time jobs. I had a full-time job when I ran my campaign. I had never raised $1 for any kind of charity or political campaign, basically asking for money for nothing from anybody. I talked with Michael. He actually helped, Michael Pickens from Libertarian Leadership. He helped me with my campaign to understand, okay, look, here's how to get a list of people from the Libertarian Party. This is how to call them and ask for money. This is how to send them an email blast. And actually, to tell you the truth, I had such a difficult time with it. I never even picked up the phone once to make a phone call, except for people who I already knew, just because I was not very confident in making a call and asking for money from someone I didn't know, even though I knew that they were libertarians and they were on the libertarian list. But the money that I did raise came just from emails. And I raised almost $5,000, and it's such a simple process. And looking back on it, I'm like, why was I even so scared about this? That was so easy, and that paid for door hangers, that paid for signs. I got some of these huge 8x4 foot signs posted up all over the city. We need to have more of this, and we need training for candidates. We need to look like we really have our act together. And we really need to run strong campaigns. And another thing I saw was most of my campaign was online through Facebook marketing. I was the only campaign like that in my entire county. I know Kevin Ludlow ran a really great campaign also. And I think he did. I know he had some billboards donated and all kinds of other stuff. I don't know how much he did online, but he also ran a very successful campaign. We need more of that. And we need more people who can do that, because like I said, if I'm pushing for I'll use the $15 minimum wage example, which I'm totally against. But if I'm pushing for that and I'm using those words, and Kevin Ludlow's pushing for that and he's using those words, and we have someone else in 5 different states and 10 different counties pushing for those same words, we're reinforcing each other's messages, and they're going to see all of us online, and then they're going to say, oh, this guy's in our district. I can actually vote for this guy, right? We need, sorry, that up. But we need national support through the national organization, and it doesn't have to be through the organization itself, because I know a lot of those guys have their full-time jobs, and they're this is not something that they can spend a whole lot of time on. But if we can figure out a way to organize ourselves so that we can come up with some way of doing this. And I mean, we can do this all on Facebook, Skype, Google Hangouts. It really doesn't take a lot. Like, the hardest part is coming up with a 5-step plan and committing to it. That's really the hardest part. But this is something that we can do, and we need to get all parties across the state involved. So I'm going to be pushing for something like that. I don't know if anyone else already has something like that they've started and haven't been able to reach out that far. If so, let's get together and let's talk about it. If there's more than one group like that, let's merge them all together and let's get something done. I know one problem with libertarians is they don't like to work with each other. Sometimes we start these little groups, and we want to run our own groups, and we like to be individuals. Yeah, that's great, but at the same time, if we join forces, we can do so much more and reach so many more people. And that's really one of our problems, is a lot of this infighting. We need to just all hold hands and sing Kumbaya and get over our differences and say, let's get this word out there so that we can really grow our party. Because honestly, that's the only way we're gonna get people elected, and we're gonna change the direction that government is going. So this is the end, finally. Sorry, I went over by about a half an hour of what I had planned. But it was a lot of information to cover. These are a bunch of books that I've read over the years that I think were really important. The Political Mind, Don't Think of an Elephant. Those two are by the same author, George Lakoff. Those are very interesting insights into how framing works and how the mental process works and how people see politics. Predictably Irrational has a lot to do about psychology and how people make decisions. It has mostly to do with consumerism and how they affect people in the marketplace. But at the same time, it's kind of a universal truth, like the non-aggression principle. It's a very simple rule. It works in business, it works in family life, it works in everything else. So these same principles that you see in Predictably Irrational are actually very easily translated into the spectrum of politics, because it all has to do with the same thing, the same way the mind works. These books, Brand Sense and Brand Washed, these are both by the same author, Mark Lindstrom. I'm just trying to make sure that's right. Yeah, they're both by the same guy. Those are very interesting insights into how companies are manipulating you, basically that mind control that's going on. And like I said a million times, I don't want us to get into the habit of doing deceptive practices, but I really want us to start understanding that these are why people are voting for the other parties. Because if we can understand why they're voting for the other parties, then we can understand how we can get them to vote for us. 22 immutable laws of marketing. Again, this has a lot to do with marketing, but that's what we're doing, isn't it? We're selling an image. We're selling a brand. We're selling the brand of each of our candidates that we're trying to elect, and we're also selling the brand of our party itself. There's some very interesting insights in here that can definitely be applied to our campaigns. 48 Laws of Power I actually got this one on a audiobook, and the guy who reads it makes it sound so sinister, but and a lot of it has to do with that. I mean, it's 48 Laws of Power, how to control people. And it's a really interesting book, because you can hear, like, when you hear these things of how people are doing, how people are controlling people, like creating a cult following is one of the laws in there. And that has to do with that herd mentality. And when you hear a lot of these laws and how he presents them, and same thing, like apply it into the world of politics, and you can hear and see how these political parties are manipulating people. They're giving, this is where the play to their fantasy came from. Put a fantasy in their head and let them go after it, and they'll do anything as long as they think they're getting to that fantasy. So of course, again, we don't want to do that deceptively, but it's something that works, and it's a way that we can. I mean, are we saving people from themselves by doing that? Is it really ultimately a good thing? And finally, libertarian leadership. I told you about. Michael Pickens wrote that book, and it is. I I was actually I was talking to him at the national convention. I didn't know who he was, and then at some point he was like, "Oh, here," he said something about his book, and I looked him up, and I was like, "Oh, I read your book. That's the only reason I'm running." So that was kind of a funny story, but that's another really great book. Definitely check that one out. If you can, check them all out. If you want to email me, I'll send you this list. They're all available on Amazon. Half of them are available in ebooks and audiobooks. But get them, do some reading on this stuff, because I mean, I'm telling you, these Democrat parties and these Republican parties are spending millions of dollars employing people who understand this stuff inside and out. The people who probably wrote half these books to come up with these strategies to make them win one party over the other, which is why those two parties are so strong. And we're over here, not making much progress at all, because we're not taking these principles and applying them. It's like, if we had the next $1 million idea, are we just going to start trying to sell it ourselves? No, we're going to hire marketing directors and advertisers, and we're going to do market research and figure out what color it should be. We really need to start applying these principles if we're going to start winning elections. So anyway, with that, here's my information again. My name is Dan Behrman. My email address is dan@danfortexas.org. That's a phone number you can reach me at. If you have any questions, definitely I want to have conversations with people about this kind of stuff. I might do some more broadcasts later. There was actually like another 20 or 30 slides that I had to cut out of this yesterday just because I already saw it was going way over. But there's plenty more information to share. We can have discussions about this. We really need to figure out a way to get more people engaged in this and really make this happen. So thanks for joining me. I'm going to post this up so that it can be shared. Of course, if you're watching that after this actual point, you already know that. I guess thank you, and let's keep fighting the good fight. And I hope to see you at one of the conventions. Now, if I can only figure out how to turn this thing off.